Page 35. The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living, an expert guide to making the life-saving benefits of carbohydrate restriction sustainable and enjoyable. By Jeff S. Volek, Ph.D., Rhode and Stephen D. Phinney, M.D., Ph.D. 1.3 Utility and Sustainability of Carbohydrate Restriction. Up until 150 years ago, the apparent motivation for humans to eat a low-carbohydrate diet was because that was what their regional environment provided. For example, absent wild orchards and fields of waving grain, the Inuit had little choice other than meat and fat from the Arctic tundra and the sea. However, some cultures with long experience and apparent choice attempted to actively defend their low-carbohydrate lifestyle. Examples of this included the Bison people of the North American Great Plains, who maintained their nomadic existence until the bison were virtually exterminated, and the Masai of East Africa who still avoided vegetable foods, against the vigorous advice of the British, into the 1930s. Manifestly, for these cultures, not only were their low-carbohydrate dietary practices sustainably allowing them to survive and reproduce for hundreds of generations under difficult environmental conditions, they regarded their diet of animal products as preferable to an agricultural lifestyle, despite the latter having been available to them. In the 1920s, carbohydrate restriction was employed in mainstream medical practice in the management of diabetes and in the treatment of seizures. In both of these clinical situations, as there was no other effective treatment, these dietary interventions were sustained by individual patients for years. With the advent of insulin for diabetes and anti-seizure drugs like diphenhydramine, Dilantin, these dietary interventions began to fall out of favor. However, now that the practical limitations and side effects of modern pharmaceutical therapy are becoming recognized, the wheel may be again turning. One of the perceived limitations of modern low-carbohydrate diets is that they have become stigmatized as extreme and thus necessarily limited to temporary use. Adding to this sense of transience, most popular diet books promoting carbohydrate restriction have effectively only described an initial energy-restricted phase to promote weight loss. So what does the reader do after 3 months eating 1,400 kilocalories/day with a 30 pounds weight loss? No healthy adult over 5 feet tall achieves energy balance on 1,400 kilocalories per day, so the transition from weight loss to long-term weight maintenance necessarily means adding back food. But how much, and from what foods? Carbohydrates? Protein? Fat? It is a primary hypothesis, if not principle, of this book that a low-carbohydrate diet that is sustainable in the long term, for example, for the management of type 2 diabetes, seizures, or severe obesity, necessarily contains an appropriate fat content in its weight maintenance phase. Thus, if a book promoting a low-carb diet does not contain practical instruction and recipes promoting the inclusion of fat in its maintenance diet, it is not likely to result in much long-term success among its readers. To this end, later chapters in this book will describe the physiology of fuel partitioning, clinical use of low-carbohydrate and ketogenic diets, plus 2 full chapters and a week's worth of menus addressing the practicalities of preparing and consuming a maintenance diet that is rich in fat. Recent and future research. The last decade has seen a dramatic increase in the volume of research publication on the topic of carbohydrate restriction. Multiple randomized, controlled trials, RCTs, have been performed comparing a variety of other diets to carbohydrate restriction. Many of these have demonstrated clear advantages in favor of low-carbohydrate and ketogenic diets. However, the interpretation of these studies is sometimes clouded by reticence of authors or editors to give them due credit or by pitfalls in research methodology. The pros and cons of this recent body of research are addressed throughout this book. In addition, multiple contributing authors provide their insights on topics pertinent to the range of effects and benefits of carbohydrate restriction. Page 39.